When we're sleeping, that's when our brain takes out the trash. A 3 pound brain produces over 5 pounds of toxins and trash across the course of a
Oh,
year. And so our brain is clearing all of that out. Think of you have a sponge and you sop up all this water. Well, you have to eventually squeeze it out so that you can soak up more water. You have to allow your brain to sleep so that it can take everything that you've processed throughout the day and that you've learned, and it can transfer it from that short term to long term so we can use it later. That's why you would cram for an exam or a test and you could remember it for the test, but did you remember it a few days later? No.
that
And,
fits.
what's also interesting is it's the same thing for our physical body to repair. So, from a workout standpoint, we have all of these athletes. I mean, you hear LeBron James talking about how sleep is his superpower, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you're doing your workouts, yes, the workout and the time in the gym is important, but it's actually the time that you're sleeping. That's when all those little micro tears, the body's healing and the muscles are growing.
What is up, passion seekers? I'm super excited today. I even get note cards for this one. She's a TEDx speaker, and a sleep and workplace well-being expert, keynote speaker, and a founder of Mind Impact Consulting, and also a clinical licensed psychologist. Dr. Melissa Milanak, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this conversation.
I'm so excited. So I wish we had this recording this whole time. We've been probably talking for solid 20 minutes just about everything that you do and everything that we can kind of lead this. And honestly, we could go 1,000 different ways. But one, let's kind of talk about you a little bit. So one, doctor, which is fantastic. That's an achievement in itself. But two, you said you were started as a trauma.
Yes. So my career started specializing in trauma and PTSD. And
Wow.
so from the 9/11 days to doing work over the last 20 years in Northern Ireland, working with the Troubles and the work happening there, last 6 years back in South Africa, doing work with communities who were displaced during apartheid, and really just looking across all aspects of trauma. And that's how, when we look at people that have experienced trauma and significant stress, where we see sleep disruptions. And so spent the last few decades
Yeah.
researching and looking at the role of sleep and trauma and stress and anxiety. And so that's what took me along that circuitous path to be doing a lot more work now, helping people to sleep better and stress less.
Wow. So if you haven't picked up already and you're listening and you're trying to figure out where this is going to go. So your sleep psychologist, I guess, is probably the best way to generalize it. But I think sleep's one of the most fascinating things because one, you have hustle culture that sits here and tells you, oh, don't sleep, work 24 hours a day, grind, grind, grind. But then you have, health specialists like yourself in this case saying like, no, sleep is what creates great productivity. So like you have two conflicting arguments on two different sides, but one saying don't do it, the other saying do it. And I think that's what we're gonna dive into a lot. And as entrepreneurs, I think that's the first thing. I'm guilty of it. That's the first thing that sacrifices is sleep. Like, oh, I don't need more sleep. I'm gonna just, stay up later. For me, it's getting up early. I don't like staying up late. I'm a grandpa. When 8 o'clock hits, I'm like starting to yawn. I'm like, all right. But if I need to wake up at like 1 a.m. and start grinding and working, I'd be more than happy to do that. So, and that's why my wife calls me a psycho. She's like, no one can get up that early and just work. I'm like, I don't know why. But so like hitting on that a little bit, we will go into trauma, but like the hustle culture just tells you don't sleep, work. Based on your research and everything you've seen, including to the trauma, how accurate is that?
So, society for many years has told people you snooze, you lose, time is money.
Yeah.
And for some people, there's almost that sense of, well, I did it, so the next generation should do it as well.
Mm,
And almost that where you're paying your dues and you're earning that effort. And it
yeah.
was always who was the first one to show up and the last one to leave. And if you were tired, it was proof that you were dedicated.
Mm,
And while for many people that has kind of been the mindset, what our research is showing us is that it is completely the opposite. When you're getting quality rest and quality sleep,
mm.
then your brain is going to be able to function better. We look at learning, memory, concentration, focus. When we're sleeping, that's when our brain takes out the trash. A 3 pound brain produces over 5 pounds of toxins and trash across the course of a
Whoa.
year. And so our brain is clearing all of that out. Think of you have a sponge and you sop up all this water. Well, you have to eventually squeeze it out so that you can soak up more water. You have to allow your brain to sleep so that it can take everything that you've processed throughout the day and that you've learned, and it can transfer it from that short term to long term so we can use it later. That's why you would cram for an exam or a test and you could remember it for the test, but did you remember it a few days later? No.
No, not a chance.
And what's also interesting is it's the same thing for our physical body to repair. So, from a workout standpoint, we have all of these athletes. I mean, you hear LeBron James talking about how
Mhm.
sleep is his superpower, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you're doing your workouts, yes, the workout and the time in the gym is important, but it's actually the time that you're sleeping. That's when all those little micro tears, the body's healing and the muscles are growing.
Interesting.
When we're not getting enough sleep, our workouts stop working for us. The body, for some people, will actually start to break down muscle and burn that and hold on to fat as a potential energy source to fuel their workout later. As a gentleman, when you're getting 1 hour less sleep a night than your body needs, it ages you in as much as 11 years of testosterone.
Holy crap.
So if you're 39, your body's functioning as a 50-year-old because you're getting 1 hour less sleep a night than your body needs.
Now, can you regain? So if I get that 1 hour less sleep and I'm, aging, quote, quicker or some sorts, if I start sleeping 1 hour more, will it kind of regenerate itself?
So your body will be able to autocorrect.
Okay.
And the thing is that our bodies and brains are so smart that they do adjust and
Yeah.
adapt. But sometimes those adjustments and adaptations aren't always the healthiest. Think about for a woman that's pregnant, if she's not getting enough calcium, her body will take it out of her bones to fuel the baby, but then her bones are more brittle. So we need to be cautious that, yes, we may be able to kind of power through
Mhm.
and, okay, we're not sleeping well, but we're just going to be able to function and we're exhausted and we're going to have that caffeine and those energy
Yeah.
drinks and all those things. We can do it for so long, but then our body will burn out. And so, what's great though is when we do start sleeping the right amount, then our bodies and our brains are able to heal. We can eventually kind of make that up, but that's different than trying to do a quick catch up.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is what happens? You have a really long week. You say, okay, I can't wait for the weekend. I'm going to catch up on my sleep.
Yeah.
Well, it takes 4 days on average to make up for 1 hour of lost sleep.
Oh God.
The 2 day weekend is only half. Now, maybe our retirees, they're
Yeah.
out doing a fun business on the side. They have a 4 day weekend. But for most people, you don't have that. So it doesn't catch up in the same way. It takes time to get there. So you can't just push yourself all week and then try to think, okay, well, the weekend, we don't have a camel hump to store sleep the same way that our
Unfortunately.
body can store, nutrients and other things.
That's oh God. That's so fascinating. Because I mean, one, I'm fascinated with the brain. I'm just obsessed with it in the sense of achieving goals. Like I think, 90% of people don't achieve their goals because one, they let the brain get in the way. They let the what ifs get in the way. And that's kind of more my thing. And like manifesting. There's I don't mean manifest like I really want, $1 million and poof, it's in my account. Not in that sense, but in manifesting in the sense of like I know my vision, I know what I want my business to be,
Yeah.
and your brain almost sees that, and in the I always butcher this, the reticular activating system in your brain. It's I've always heard it be the filter of what comes in, what goes out, all that fun stuff. So please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm the furthest thing from a licensed psychologist or anything. But like with that, like if I'm thinking real estate, like I'm in real estate, so I'm always thinking real estate and I want to be a successful realtor, do, so many deals. When I hear, other people in a coffee shop and I hear them talking about real estate or something along those lines, I hear it, I notice it. But if they're talking about their dog and how I didn't go potty this morning and all of that stuff, it just white noise to me. Is that true?
So our brains in general, I mean, if you think about it, if you're all of a sudden researching and you want to buy a car and you're thinking about a specific brand of car or a specific model,
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're going to start seeing more and
Seeing
more of
more?
it on the
Yeah,
road.
okay. The red car
Because
theory.
right, but part of that is that it's what is it that we're focusing on. Our brains are in general designed to create habits and schemas and these ways, these habits and patterns of thinking so that we can filter out certain information in the sense of think of it this way. So when you first were learning to drive a car,
Mhm.
you would go through all of the steps where it'd say, okay, I'm going to get in the car, shut the door, I'm going to lock it, I'm going to put my seatbelt on, foot on the brake, key in the ignition. You go through all the steps. You still do all of those steps, but you don't actively consciously think of it anymore because it's become a habit. And
Yeah.
your brain creates those habits so that it can free up space around you. Traditionally, it was survival. I could
Mhm.
be doing these things, but I could be checking for threats and protecting myself.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that whenever we are attuned to certain things, we're going to, if it's in that worldview of what's important to us, that's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to hear. But we also have these habits and these ways of thinking about things or actions that sometimes we do automatically that aren't always as helpful either. It may be, for instance, certain beliefs. Okay, I'm just not a good sleeper. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
or from a different strategy, you're driving home and you're not even thinking about it. And it's, oh, I'm home already because your brain
Yeah.
was thinking on something else because you've done this so much. So there's different ways that the brain filters information in and out. Sometimes it's helpful,
Mhm.
like those habits. Other times, though, if you think about there may be a certain pattern of doing things. Maybe every day when you take a shower, you have the order of washing your hair and what you're doing. And then if you stop, you have to stop and say, oh, wait, I got to start back from the beginning because I didn't realize where I
Yeah.
left off. So there's sometimes where that automatic patterning and those habits can be really helpful. But if those aren't helpful ways of thinking, maybe you have a negative view towards yourself, or you don't think that you have what it takes to run that
Mhm.
company or to do those things, or you've convinced yourself, I'm not a good sleeper, or I just don't have enough hours in my day, that can also sometimes be very saddening or depressing for
Yeah.
some folks, depending. And it's really interesting when you talk about the power of the brain, because we see that from a sleep standpoint. To bring it back to that for a
Yeah.
second, in terms of how much sleep do I need? And what I mean by that, so the 8 hours, that's an
Mhm.
average.
Okay.
So for gentlemen, the typical shoe size is a 10 and a half.
Okay.
Not every guy, if I asked, polled 10 people, some would have a larger or smaller shoe
Yeah.
size. Well, eight is the same thing. The folks that need more than 8 hours will give themselves 8 hours max because that's all they've basically budgeted into their schedule. And if they need longer sleep, people are telling them they're lazy, something's wrong. But the opposite, people
Mm.
that need less than 8 hours, you might wake up after 6 or 7 hours, feel amazing, look at the clock, you immediately feel tired because your brain did an override and told you that you should, all the shoulds, that you should feel tired. And so that's why it's so
So
important. Yeah, there was a really neat study.
I mind blown. Holy crap.
Yes. I mean, there are fabulous studies that have been done where they literally had individuals in situations where they didn't know what time it was. They didn't have the light cues. They had them go to bed and wake up when they felt rested, do that for a few days. Some people needed 6 hours, some people needed seven. And then they put them back into their regular life. And the next day they woke up after the same amount of time, but looked at the clock. And because it wasn't 8 hours, they immediately reported feeling tired when they didn't know what time it was.
So how can someone, this is me for personal reasons, but how can I figure out how much sleep I need?
So, two keys to that. One is that the amount of sleep that you need typically changes over the course of your life.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things that people don't realize. But if we think about what sleep is for, that cell growth, that
Yeah.
regeneration, think about how much sleep a newborn gets versus a 6 month old, a
Mhm.
2 year old, a 10-year-old. If you don't have kids, think about a puppy. Even the puppy sleeps more. It just,
Yeah.
if you think of the way that that works. So that's one of the first contradictions because most people think that when they're older, they need more sleep because they're feeling tired and exhausted. But what it is technically in general, we find that we need less sleep the older we get because we're not having as much of that cell growth and regeneration.
Interesting.
Think about it from food, like portion size, right? Like you
Yeah.
have the senior specials. And so by the time we hit a certain age, I always make the joke that the only thing left growing is our waistline, and we're trying to stop that.
So true.
But that's that idea where when we're younger, we're pushing in that hustle culture and we're trying to make it happen. And we never seem to have enough time to get sleep and we're feeling tired. But because our body can bounce back faster because we're healing faster, we may feel that we can push through that. But as we get older, the type of sleep that we're getting does shift and change.
Hmm.
And so we have sleep where our body is healing and we have state. So when we sleep, we go through a process
Mhm.
that's made up of different stages of sleep and cycles of sleep, and different important things happen at different stages. So there's deep sleep. People talk about it as slow wave sleep. If you wear the wearables and trackables,
Mhm.
that is where the body repairs. And you have REM sleep, which is where the mind is doing its repair and the memory and the emotion balance and all those pieces. And so you have to get enough of both. But the older we get, we tend to get less and less of that body repair sleep, which is why we
Interesting.
feel more tired and why we don't heal as quickly. But what's interesting is when we sleep at night, if we're not getting enough sleep, we will see a prioritization on the body healing first. Survival. I need my legs to work to run away from the bear in the woods, even if my brain can't tell what it is.
Wow. Yeah.
So when you're not getting enough sleep, you may wake up and feel somewhat rested, but your brain isn't as sharp, which brings us back to your original question, which is why we see lower productivity, our response time, reaction time. So the first key is to understand that our sleep will change throughout the course of our
Mhm.
lives and our sleep need. And then that's where we need to identify our sleep window that we were talking about before we started
Yeah.
streaming.
Let's hit on that. I'm curious about that. That was
Sure.
what your TEDx talk
Yes.
was on. Yeah. So let's
Yes.
talk about that a little bit.
So, what the research shows us is that there are many things that play an important role in getting sleep. And most people know about sleep hygiene.
Hmm.
But the number one piece that actually helps people to get their sleep back on track is actually determining the appropriate sleep window. When I'm talking about sleep window, I'm talking about the amount of sleep and the when to get it.
Hmm.
So the first piece is that we're going to, so I break it down into the way I did it in my TEDx was a 4-step process.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll let you play along with us.
Yeah.
So, step one is that you need to identify how much sleep you are currently getting on a typical night. So, if you took your 24 hours and you averaged together, some people sleep different during the week and on the weekends.
Mhm.
We're going to fix that because you wouldn't eat healthy during the week and then have all snacks and fast food on the weekend and tell me you were adhering to a healthy diet all 7 days.
Very true.
But people are
Yeah.
consistently inconsistent.
Yes.
One schedule during the week, and then I'm going to catch up on the weekends, which we're going to fix.
Yeah.
So, and naps too. So, if you take your 24-hour window and come up with the average, I will say if anybody that's listening has things like untreated sleep apnea and such, we wouldn't want to do what I'm walking you
Mhm.
through because what we're talking about right now is going to reduce the number of times people wake up. Because every time we want to sleep straight through the night,
Yeah.
every time we wake up, we actually have to start over, like Chutes and Ladders, where you go back to the
Hmm.
beginning.
Yeah.
And so when we start over, that reduces our ability to get to certain types of sleep that we need later in the night.
Interesting.
So that's why we want to reduce the wake ups.
Mhm.
But if you have sleep apnea, your body's waking you up to breathe. So
Yeah. So
I
please
want
wake
to
up.
wake.
Please wake up.
But the key is if it's treated, if you have your CPAP machine, if you're wearing your dental appliances, then this works great.
Okay.
It's just the people that are resistant.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about that, we can go down that
I
road a
might go
little
there. Yeah.
later because there are a lot of people that have sleep apnea and refuse to do anything about it because they don't want to wear the mask.
Yeah.
But we can talk all about
My
how to
uncle
fix
is on
that.
it, and he used to always walk into the room when he wakes me up with his mask on. I used to think it was Darth Vader, but then I got older. But back to it.
Anyway, yeah. So back to the window. So step one is how much sleep are you getting? Come up with an average. If for any reason the number is less than 5, your new number is 5. For everyone else, we want to be realistic. So what I
Mhm.
mean is time in bed is not time asleep.
Mm.
So if you're in bed reading, watching TV, you don't count that.
Yeah.
I want just how much time are you unconscious and realistic, not how much sleep you want to get or think you need. We have to start with reality. So if you take your number and we want to come up with one number, not a range. We don't want like 6 to 7 hours. So for instance, right now, how many hours of sleep are you getting on an average night?
Mm. So I go to bed at 9:30. I get up at 4:30,
Okay.
Monday through Friday. I would say,
So you have a 7-hour window there.
yeah.
Are you falling asleep right away? Are you awake for a bit? Do you wake up throughout the night?
Typically, I fall asleep pretty quick. So
Right.
I would say, but the weekends, oh God, this is where it kills me. Depending on like if I'm working a wedding or something, I don't get home till 1,
Yeah.
and I wake up religiously at 7.
Mhm.
That's like my cutoff. So that's not even 7 hours, like 5.
So
Yeah.
so during the week when you're getting your healthy sleep,
Okay.
about 7 hours is your typical.
Yeah.
Okay. Because what's interesting is yours is the reverse for some people, but we have a lot of people that their weekends are going to be less because they're trying to cram in social events and other things that they want to
Yeah.
do as well. So what we would do, and part of it is we're looking at when you're sleeping through the night, are you waking up multiple times or do
No.
you tend to sleep through?
I'll sleep through.
Perfect. For the person that is waking up multiple times, we want to figure out how often they're awake and we reduce that from the number.
Oh
So if
boy.
you get in bed at 9:30 and it takes you 30 minutes to fall asleep, we don't count those 30 minutes. If you wake up after 2 hours and you're up for 30 minutes or up for an hour, we don't count that as sleep either. So what ends up happening is for you right now, you're averaging about 7 hours of sleep at night.
Hmm.
And what's good is you're already on a consistent schedule.
Yeah.
Most people aren't doing that. But say your number was 7. So we would come up with that. Okay, that's step one. Step two is the when. to get the sleep.
Hmm.
And the when is actually different for many different people, which we'll talk about because you talked about early
Yeah.
birds and night owls. But what we do is we figure out what the earliest is that someone has to wake up. So if your early is 4:30,
Hmm.
we would take 4:30 and we would work those 7 hours backwards. And that's how you get the window of what your ideal sleep should start at. So say somebody's spending 10 hours in bed,
Hmm.
but they're only getting 6 hours of sleep. We're going to shrink the window and we're not going to have them spend 4 hours in bed wasting time
Yeah.
and being frustrated. So what we end up doing is we pull out all the awakenings, we shrink the window down. Now, somebody might say that they want to get up at 6 and they're only getting 6 hours of sleep. Well, then their new window would be 12 to 6. But midnight might feel really late to them.
Hmm.
So we can adjust it and make it 11 to 5 or 10 to 4, but we're not stretching the window. So
Yeah.
think,
No, that makes a lot of sense.
think of it this way. So if I had, and I use the pizza dough example, if I had 6 inches of pizza dough and I spread it out in a 6-inch pie pan, it's nice and thick and even.
Yeah.
But if I had to take those 6 inches and make it now fit into a 10-inch pie pan, it'll fit, but it's going to have holes and gaps because there's
Hmm.
not enough to fill the space. And that's what's happening for most people with their sleep, is that they only have built up 6 hours of sleepiness throughout the day, but they're trying to make it stretch to fit into a 10-hour window. Because
Wow.
they want to
Yeah.
go to bed earlier, their bed's comfy, it's cold outside, they want to hide from their
Yeah.
kids, they paid the money on the mattress, they
Yeah.
want to be there. And so that's what ends up happening. And so we have to end up shrinking the window for people that used to like defrag a computer or squeeze
Hmm.
the air out of a Ziploc bag. We need to squeeze out all of those awakenings. So that's where we get, so step 1 is the number. And then step 2 is we find the window that works best for them based on the number, not based on what they want to get.
Interesting.
So that's how you start with the window. And then step 3 and 4 is how we get our bodies and brains and aligned with it and how we stick to it and then how we make adjustments. So step 3 is you're going to now stick to your new schedule for 7 days, which can be really hard for some
Yeah.
people, simple versus easy. But I always say, if you've spent weeks, months, and years where you haven't slept well, all I'm asking for is days. But how it works is that means that if say your new bedtime was 12 midnight,
Hmm.
you're not getting in bed at 11 to read. You can read on the couch, you could read in the chair, but you don't get in bed until it's actually time to sleep.
Interesting.
What happens is that for a lot of people, they are confusing their brain. So your brain should be reserved for sleep and romantic activity, and that's
Hmm.
it. Anything else, your brain's confused. Am I supposed to be awake right now? Should I be paying attention to what I'm reading and checking my email and watching TV? Should I be asleep, watching the baby monitor, doing all these things, problem solving? So that's why you don't. So if your bedtime is midnight, you get in bed at midnight, shut out the lights, and crawl under the covers. If you're laying there and you're tossing and turning and you can't sleep, you actually get out of bed. One of the worst things you can do is lay in bed and try to force yourself to sleep. Because now
Wow.
you connect the bed with stress and frustration instead of rest and relaxation.
Interesting. See, I love the power of the brain. It's so crazy.
So if I said to you, I'm going to go to the movies, what snack am I going to get? What would most people get?
Popcorn.
Right. So you immediately go, movies, popcorn. I want your brain to say bed sleep, not bed stress and process, not bed my office, not bed my, do you see what I'm saying? My
Yeah.
escape.
Wow.
So we have to reassociate for our brains what our bed is for, which makes it easier than when we're traveling
Hmm.
because our brain knows bed sleep, regardless if it's a hotel in a different city, which for a lot of our entrepreneurs, they're traveling and doing
Yeah.
pitches. And when you're having that really important meeting the next day and you need to fall asleep, you want to have that stronger connection to fall asleep faster. So we can talk about that in a
Yeah.
minute if you want. But so what you do is when it's time for bed, you get in bed, you shut off the lights. If you can't sleep or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're tossing and turning, you get out of bed, do something boring, fold the laundry, empty the dishwasher, do something like that.
Yeah.
And then you get in bed when you're tired. And that also means that even if you woke up for 2 hours in the middle of the night, when the alarm goes off the next morning, you still get out of bed. You don't hit the snooze button, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
And you don't sleep later because what most people are thinking is, oh my gosh, I didn't get enough sleep. I'm going to be exhausted. How am I going to function? But now we add more stress to that. And so what we need to do is we need to teach the brain and recondition it to when is it's time to sleep. So that's why for those 7 days, we have a consistent bedtime, a consistent wake time. And also during those 7 days, we don't nap.
Oh, see, I would not have a problem with this. I hate napping. I hate it.
What's interesting though is for so many people, they're not getting the right sleep at night. So then they feel tired during the day. They start to take the nap.
Hmm.
But if your mom ever told you, don't eat a snack, you'll ruin your dinner,
Same concept.
when you take your nap, you ruin your sleep because you're depleting the sleepiness. So no wonder you don't have enough sleepiness to sleep all the way through the night. And when you're napping at the same time every day, your body has learned that that's when it gets rest. So it makes you feel tired at 2 o'clock every afternoon. But the difference here is that that's not going to be the same type of typical restful sleep as you're getting at night. Because remember, at night, we have to go back and forth through the cycles of sleep. And our body has this whole algorithm of when it's healing the body and healing the mind. And it has to get through the whole process to get the full restorative sleep.
Hmm.
So if you're going to nap, you want it to be a power nap. 20, 30 minutes max. That's like having that quick scoop of peanut butter, eating the apple instead of the whole bag of chips in the middle
Yeah,
of the afternoon. 20 to 30-minute power nap. And you don't want it to be every day and at the same time every day.
just occasionally.
Just whenever you really need that boost or travel or jet lag. Or a lot of people used to use naps to boost creativity and thinking and during the day. Thomas Edison would literally sit, put a metal panel on the floor, 2 ball bearings in his hand, sit down, and as soon as he fell asleep and they hit it or woke him up, he would take a notepad and jot everything down that he had been thinking.
That's
There's
interesting.
so many stories of creativity and Mendeleev with the periodic table and the design of it and musicians. I mean, the stories that I could tell you.
Wow. So, like, one, the window, that's incredible
Mhm.
to know that. And the other thing is, and I want to talk about it because, one, it's a shift that I've had recently that I haven't understood. And you kind of hit on is the snooze button. So, typically, I've always gotten up really early. That's just always been me. Well, I started in college, getting up early, going to the gym, and just getting that morning routine set in
Mhm.
place. So I get up early. In college, super easy. Just literally first alarm go up, I wake up, go. My brain just kind of goes. Now, recently, and I don't know why, since married, we were the first year of marriage, I was like, transition. I was still able to kind of get up, first alarm, go. Now it's like first alarm hits. I'm like, oh God, it hits snooze. And I'm like, I set like I've never had to set 3 alarms, yet alone 2 alarms. But lately I've had to set 3 alarms because I'll hit snooze, or I will literally hit like turn off my alarm and then wake up and be like, my alarm never went off. But like I don't know what happened. I think
Yeah.
I just got muscle memory and just hit the
Yeah.
turn off button. So what changed? Would you say in that perspective?
There are a number of things that can have an impact
Hmm.
on it. So, and there's like 3 different questions to
I know.
answer. So let's take it in a couple different
Yeah.
steps. So the first piece is that in general, when we're waking up the same time every day, our body is going to learn when it's time for us to wake up. So we actually start the wake up process on average about 2 to 3 hours
Mm.
before we wake up. So just as when we're falling asleep, our body drops a few degrees in temperature, it changes the chemicals that it's producing. When it's time for us to wake up, that's why actually a lot of most people typically will wake up around 6 or 7 is their wake up time in the
Mhm.
morning. And that's why we see so many people that are average waking up around like 2, 3 in the morning every single morning, because that's about 2 to 3 hours before their final wake up time. And that's when the body is starting to raise in temperature again. That's when it's starting to produce cortisol
Yeah.
again. And so people wake up, and I do have to share this for a second.
Yeah.
One of the worst things that people do when they wake up in the middle of the night is check the clock. If you wake up in the middle of the night, it doesn't matter what time it is. But think about what happens. Your brain starts to calculate. Okay, I've been asleep for 3 or 4 hours. How rested am I? I have to be up in 45 minutes. Should I try to fall back to sleep? None of that is very restful. One of the worst things you can do when you wake up in the middle of the night is look at the clock. And so, not only checking your phone, which we'll talk about tech
Oh
later,
yeah.
but so they wake up, they check the clock. Now they're frustrated that they're up at 2 a.m. again or 3 a.m. again, and it starts that whole process. And so, that's where one, it's important to recognize that we have to have that consistent wake time because our body's starting that wake up. So, when we're hitting the snooze button, we're negating that. We're saying, just kidding. I didn't really mean for you to
Yeah.
wake up. And so now, those 8 or 9 minutes of snooze sleep, we're not getting back into restful sleep. We're we're kind of hovering there. Now we're feeling more tired and exhausted. And now we need to hit the snooze button again, hit the snooze button again. So, one, if you find that you're hitting it over and over again, it's better to set the alarm for 10, 15 minutes later and just wake up slightly later. People are now scheduling in snooze into their wake up, where they're setting their alarm 20 or 30 minutes earlier than they actually want to get up so they can hit the snooze
Yeah.
button. I mean, it feels great to say no to something,
Yeah.
but it's actually really unhealthy from a sleep standpoint. So it's better to set the alarm later, let your body get the full restorative sleep, and then it's easier for you to be able to get up. So I would first be wanting to ask you, are you setting the alarm a little bit earlier and finding that you're working the snooze button into it? So that's one thing that people are doing.
So I am now.
And I'm wondering, and then you wonder why it's so hard because your body was used to getting those 10 to 15 minutes is enough to adjust everything. So we talked about the steps, right? We never got to step 4 because step 1 is the number, step 2 is the window, step 3 is stick to it, step 4 is evaluate and adjust. And the reason that I'm bringing us back to that is that what our ideal sleep will look like. We want to be efficient sleepers. 90 to 95% of the time that we are in bed, we should be asleep. So that means falling asleep within 10 to 15 minutes, sleeping straight through the night minus a bladder break. It's normal to wake up once, use the restroom, go back to sleep, and wake up and feel rested and not need that nap. Well, if that's you, great, you've hit your sleep sweet spot. If you're finding that you're still waking up after that week, we probably weren't fully honest with ourselves and we need to shrink it a little bit. But for mostly everybody else, they still feel tired now that they're sleeping all the way through the night. So that means that we need to extend the window and give ourselves a little bit more sleep. And we do that in 15-minute increments. So instead of saying that 12 to 6 that I was talking about,
Mhm.
now we do 11:45 to 6 and do that for 7 days. And then 11:30 to 6 and do that for 7 days until we hit that sleep sweet spot. So now if you're thinking about how that works, when you're hitting that snooze button, that's 9 or 10 minutes, you see how that's right in starting to get into
Yeah.
that spot where now you're waking up and then you're falling, toggling in and out of light sleep. So setting your alarm for 15 minutes later, instead of hitting the snooze button, you will actually wake up and feel more rested. So that's why, as
Interesting.
you were talking
Yeah.
through it. Now, there are also a number of reasons why people maybe have had a set sleep schedule and now all of a sudden they're feeling more tired. For some people, it's the fact that maybe they have more stress going on in their life right now. And so the brain needs a little bit of extra time for that cognitive performance and emotion regulation and healing in part. For some people, and maybe that we're physically active, and we know as we get older, we need
Yeah.
more sleep to heal. So maybe we've started exercising again and doing more workouts at the gym. And so our body needs a little more time to heal. Could be that it's allergy season and we're not getting oxygen as easy and our body's having to work harder to breathe. I mean, there's
Interesting.
so many things that can put that stress and strain on the body, but we want to make sure that we're doing things to help it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for our passion seekers, for
Yeah.
those that are trying to balance and do everything, the last thing we want to do is make our work harder.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we do that we think makes our sleep better that makes it worse. I mean, that's why we're having this conversation in the first place.
Yeah. I'm just a whole new world's opening up in my eyes because I was fascinated by the brain with goals and like, manifesting all this. This is a whole other ball game. And I'm like, oh my God.
We don't even scratch the surface.
I
We're
know.
just getting started.
That's just like, I want to go so far into this. But like the other thing is, so like, I mean, for me, like I was the first one, like I'll sleep when I was dead. That was always my statement. Time is money. And, from this, it's like, well, no, technically sleep is money because the better you sleep, the more productive you are, the better your efficiency, your business runs. And like, there's times where I've noticed it where, like I'd be working, all weekend, have minimal sleep. And then Monday I have listing presentation and I'm off my game. I'm like, this is just awful. And so I notice it that perspective, or I'm grumpy or, stuff, the basics. But there's times where on the flip side, I guess the more positive side is going to the alarm thing. Like there's been times where I just hit the alarm, and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta get up. And I'll get up, but I'm not happy about it. There's other times where I literally alarm goes off. I'm up, like
Yeah.
wide awake.
Yeah.
Not even bat an eyelash. Don't even yawn. What should I recognize that time and be like, okay, that's my sleep window?
So that's part of it, right? So if you are consistently going to bed at the same time every night, you're falling asleep quickly, you're sleeping through the night, and then the key is you wake up and feel rested, that's a great indicator that you are getting the right amount of sleep that your body and your brain needs.
Hmm.
It's different than you wake up and you're just so tired and so groggy, or people talk about like feeling like they have that sleep hangover
Yeah.
and such. And so that usually can happen for a few reasons. One, if it's consistent, usually it's you're not getting enough sleep.
Hmm.
For some people, it's because their sleep isn't consistent in the schedule. So sometimes they're waking up at 4. And I'm saying this because it's not maybe the case for you,
Yeah.
but for a lot of
Yeah.
our viewers. Because if somebody sometimes wakes up at 4 and sometimes wakes up at 7 and sometimes think of it this way. If you eat dinner at 6 o'clock every night, you start to feel hungry around 5:30
Yeah.
because your body knows it's time to eat. If you eat at 5 and at 7 and at 10, your body never knows when to feel hungry. So you're going to have weird cravings throughout the day. It's not going to know when it's going to get its next meal.
Hmm.
It's actually harder to lose weight when you're more inconsistent with
I
your food
yeah,
schedule.
I learned that the hard way.
But it's the same thing with sleep. So when you're going to bed at the same time every night, for those that have trouble falling asleep, when you go to bed at the same time every night, your body starts to learn when its job is to sleep, and you start to feel tired at the appropriate times. You're waking up at the same time every day, your body learns when it's time to wake up. And so what it's going to do, we haven't even got into all the brain science of brain waves and all the stages of sleep
Yeah.
and such, but our brain will help to prepare us to know that it's time to wake up. So there are certain stages of sleep where our brain waves are more similar to when we're awake than others. It'll start to transition us there. So when we're dreaming, our brain waves are very similar to when we're awake. That's why you can wake up out of a dream and you're ready to respond or act. It's like, was I awake? Was I asleep? What am I doing? Versus when you're in deep sleep, when the body is repairing and you wake up and you're just groggy and out of it, like turning off your car in third gear without downshifting to neutral.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is that when we're getting up consistently at the same time, our body and brain will fall in line and help to prepare us so that when we're waking up, we feel more awake and alert as long as we're getting the right amount of sleep.
So interesting. And you said one thing, so dreams. My wife thinks I'm crazy.
You've
I
mentioned that multiple times.
listen, because I think I am, but I don't get dreams. Like every now and then I'll have like one that I can remember, but for the most part, I can't remember the last time I had a dream. Why is that? And I can tell by your facial expression, there's a solid reason as to why.
Well, as I've been saying a lot, it depends seems to be the common theme.
Yeah.
And there can be multiple reasons for it. So, one, you're really not dreaming, or two, you're not waking up when you're dreaming. Let me back up if you'll humor me for the
Yeah.
minute. So, we talked about when we go through the stages of sleep,
Mhm.
and that so we fall asleep, we have this transition stage, we have our deep sleep where our body's healing, and we have REM sleep. REM sleep is where our mind is repairing all of the memory, the emotional processing, and dreaming is typically occurring. So, if you wake up and you're in REM stage of sleep, most people will remember their dreams when they first wake up because they woke up out of a dream. But if you think about throughout a typical day, most people don't end up remembering their dreams long term. It slowly fades away.
Mhm.
So if you were experiencing REM sleep and you weren't waking up in REM sleep, some people just they won't even remember what they were dreaming because it wasn't that memorable.
Yeah.
So for some people, they dream. It's just they're not waking up in REM sleep, so they're not being triggered to remember the dream and it's fading like they normally do. For other people, when they would come into my clinic and tell me that they weren't dreaming, I would go down the sleep apnea questioning line. And
Oh
you
boy.
told me before we started this that I should do that if
Yeah.
questions come up. So and the reason I would ask it is this. Whenever we dream, our body goes into a paralysis to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
So have you ever seen the dog chasing the squirrel
Yes,
in
all
their
the
dreams?
time. Yeah.
Right. Imagine if we acted out our dreams. That wouldn't be we might injure the person sleeping next to us, throw ourselves out of bed. There's actually a specific sleep disorder called REM behavior disorder
Oh
where
God.
people's bodies don't go into that paralysis. But the paralysis is to protect us, so we're not acting out our dreams. And when the paralysis was happening, it's not that our muscles get tight and tense, it's that they lose all muscle tone. So, have you ever picked up a young child and they feel like that heavy sack of
The
potatoes?
shrimp. Yeah.
Because they're in certain stages of sleep where their body, so there's no muscle tone happening. If we don't have muscle tone, we can't move, we can't injure ourselves, we're protected while we're dreaming. How this all connects sleep apnea. So now I have my airway, I have my neck muscles. I'm going to use this water bottle. I'll pretend this is my airway.
Yeah.
So my airway, I have my neck muscles. When I go into that paralysis and they lose muscle tone, they're going to collapse. They're going to put more pressure on the airway because they don't have the tone to keep it firm, right?
Yeah.
So the older we get, the less natural muscle tone we have. So the older we get, the more collapsing, the more pressure. If we're thinking why, as people get older, we have higher risk for sleep apnea. And that typically happens
Oh,
in REM sleep because that's when the majority of dreaming is occurring. So for
wow.
people that have untreated sleep apnea, they experience significantly less REM sleep because their body doesn't want them to be in it because it wants them to breathe and it wants them to survive. I'm simplifying it, but
Yeah. No.
so some people, when they tell me they don't dream and they don't have REM sleep, I explain to them how that works. And then I start asking questions like, do you snore? Do you sleep on your back? Do you find that your throat is really sore when you wake up in the morning? What does your bed partner tell you? Do you find that the first 3, 4 hours at night you sleep pretty well and then you're waking up every hour and a half to 2 hours, but then you roll back over and fall right back to sleep? There's, and the reason that I'm asking these
Yeah.
questions, so many of those things can indicate that somebody has sleep apnea. Snoring, because there's an obstruction, and
Yeah.
that's why it's obstructive sleep apnea. There's a different kind too, called CSA, centralized sleep
Yeah.
apnea. But for obstructive sleep apnea, so you're snoring and there's this obstruction that's causing the oxygen issues. You have the people that literally stop breathing for a number of seconds and then they get those gasps and their body tries to breathe again. Some people, their oxygen levels drop. That's why it puts so much stress and strain on the heart and can contribute to heart problems and all
Wow.
these other things.
Yeah.
So when people say they don't dream, and maybe that you're just not waking up in it in when you're in a stage of sleep for dreaming, or sometimes it can be an indication based on, do you snore? Or, and do you find that for people that, like, for instance, sleep on their back, we tend to see more episodes of sleep apnea because of the way that you're laying. The neck pulls back, it puts more stress and strain, the muscles collapse, it's harder to get airway
That
clear
makes sense.
through.
Yeah.
So there's all these different things. So that's why we would go a little bit further down the road as to, are you really not dreaming? Or is it that you just don't realize that you are? That's where the wearables can come into play.
Interesting. I don't think I have sleep apnea because I sleep face down and I don't really snore.
Okay.
So, am I a good sleeper since I don't wake up in REM sleep? Does that make me a good sleeper?
So saying that you're a good sleeper,
Subjective.
yeah. You knew where I was going with that because it can mean many different things.
Yeah.
The key and the way that I will talk to people in terms of, I mean, obviously you want to feel rested.
Mhm.
You want your brain to be functioning at its optimal best. So I like to look at data. I like numbers so
I'm a
that I
numbers
can look at
person
it
too.
objectively.
Yeah.
That's why I tend to like people using some of the wearables or the sleep trackers. And we'll talk about
Yeah.
what's good and bad. The reason I'm talking about that is for the typical sleeper, for healthy sleep, we usually see that about 20 to 25% of their sleep at night is going to be spent in deep sleep with the body repairing,
Hmm.
and about 20 to 25% spent in REM sleep. So people aren't sure if they're getting the right amount of sleep. Are they really optimizing their restoration and repair? Sometimes wearing these devices for a few weeks can be helpful because then you can really see. Now, obviously, some are more accurate than
Yeah.
others. And there's a small percentage of people that I say you should not wear one because they become so obsessed with it and
Yeah.
it makes them so anxious that now it's like, oh, well, I'm only getting 19% or I'm getting 26. Is something wrong? The more important piece is to wear it day and night and to wear it more long term so you can see pattern changes
Mm.
because different people have different
Yeah.
movement rates, even color of skin tone. And so, like,
Really?
darker skins, because the way that the sensors are tracking, looking at blood pressure and
Yeah.
circulation, those pieces. So, it's when you want to look at it consistently over a number of weeks and look at patterns. If you are getting about 22 every night, and then all of a sudden you drop to 16 or you increase to 28, huh, what was driving that? Was I more stressed? Am I feeling sick? Did something happen? Was it that those were the nights that I had a few drinks before I went to sleep?
Mm.
And you can start to see how all of these external influences impact your sleep and can then determine for yourself, okay, am I getting the optimal that I want to get out of my sleep?
Wow. Gosh. Because I'm thinking of 1,000 questions that I want to go, but there's so much more that I want to hit on. Um,
You
So
said we might have to do a part two.
yeah, I mean, if y'all really like this one, comment because we'll do a part two. Because wow, the one thing we've hit on it a lot in the sense of trauma, but stress related to sleep, I think is probably one of the biggest talked about things. Like, how does stress affect? Oh, I can't sleep because I'm stressed, or whatever. I can't wake up because I'm stressed. Whatever it may be, stress and sleep are just always in the sentence together. It seems like. How
That's
does
why it's the sleep and anxiety clinic at MUSC.
it? So yeah, I want to hit on that. Like, how does stress, anxiety, trauma, all those things, will umbrella under this whole conversation, affect your sleep? Obviously, you don't sleep well, but what's really going on?
So I talk about them as having a reciprocal relationship
Mhm.
in a few different ways. So a lot of what happens is for most of us, we have no idea how much stress we're actually holding. So a few weeks ago, I was speaking for a conference, for
Mhm.
Barron's, for a conference in Vegas at the Bellagio. And I walked in and I got hit with this wave of smoke. Well, a little bit later, I didn't notice the smoke as much. And I always joke and say, did people stop smoking in Vegas? No, but you acclimate to it,
Yeah.
right? You put your feet in the ocean. We're here in Charleston. It feels cold at first. A few minutes later, it starts to warm up. Well, did we boil the ocean?
Mm.
No, we acclimated to it. The reason that I say it that way is for many of us, stress has become such a common part of our lives that we don't even realize what level of stress we're experiencing. It's almost as if for most people, they're actually very rarely getting down to full baseline. When I'm working with my patients, I talk about it as the simmering kettle, where you can tell when you're boiling. And then when it starts to come down, you think that the burner is turned
Yeah.
off, but it's just a low simmer. And so the reason that I'm explaining it like that is for many of us, the first step we need to do, and our whole goal for today was let's talk about practical tips,
Yeah.
is we need to be doing a better job of checking in with ourselves about how stressed we are. And I'm going to give you a couple different ways to do that.
Yeah.
So one, the wearable devices. We hear, or in general, you hear people talking about HRV all the time, heart rate variability.
Mhm.
Do you know how that's connected with
No.
stress and such?
No.
Do you want me
No.
to go down that rabbit hole for a
Yes,
second?
because I want to use this.
Okay. So what happens is that heart rate variability is basically exactly that. It's looking to see how does our heart rate vary and change over the course of a day. Believe it or not, the larger the number, the better. The reason is this. So if we're going throughout our typical day and then a threat comes along, we want our heart to start beating faster
Mhm.
and we want our muscles to tense and our breathing to get faster. That fight or flight, we're ready to protect ourselves. And then we want it to be able to go all the way back down and calm down. We don't want our car constantly running and idle, right? We
Yeah.
need to turn off our computers and reboot. And so what happens is what heart rate variability is showing us is that throughout the day, okay, so it's being able to react when we need it to, so we can protect ourselves from threat, survival, great, it can amp up. Or we're doing physical exercise or we're doing athletic
Mhm.
activity, our heart can respond and do what we need it to do, but then it can come back down to resting and also let our body truly rest and relax. So the larger that variability, the healthier we are in managing our stress, letting go of stress, and being able to get back to a full resting position. So looking at your HRV, if you find that that number all of a sudden is getting smaller and smaller, that can be an indicator that you're in a higher stress state and you're not fully coming back to resting. So that's one thing. Another, take all the technology out of it. We haven't even gone down the
Yeah. No.
technology piece yet, but take technology out of it and let your body tell you. So I told you I was going to have you help me with
Yeah.
this. So I want you to take your shoulders
Oh boy.
and I want you to put them up to your ears as high as you can. Oh, come on, go high.
I got big
As
left.
high as we can. Okay, and then drop it really quick. Okay, did you feel any tension?
Yes, a lot.
So that's an indicator that you're holding tension in your body. There are
Interesting.
things, but they typing, driving,
Well, it's so
sitting in the
funny.
same position.
So I went to a masseuse the other day to get a massage, and it was an hour and a half massage, full body massage. This lady spent her entire time on my neck and shoulders, and afterwards she came to me. She was like, "Are you okay?" Like, yeah, I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" She was like, "You just I." She was like, "I'm gonna have bruises because I had to go in so hard because you were carrying so much stress and tension in your shoulders." And I was like, "Am I okay?" But going back to the normal variance, like real estate's just a stressful, business anyways. And to me, I think I've been in it so long, it's just, it's normal. Yeah.
And that is exactly my point, is that when you're living in certain areas, people that live in New York City don't even hear the noise anymore because they blocked it out because they're so acclimated to it. And they can't sleep when they go into the middle of the woods camping because it's too quiet. When we're so used to holding that stress and that tension, that becomes the norm. That's what I was talking about, like the water feeling warmer, acclimating to the smoke around you. And so the reason that I have people do that is one, doing that quick daily check in with yourself about how stressed am I? How much stress am I holding? Not only does it help our body to fully relax, but it also helps us from a healthier standpoint for us to be able to have full allocated resources to other things that we want. What I just had you do is part of an exercise called PMR, which stands for progressive muscle relaxation. When you overly tighten a muscle group, it can cause it to fatigue. You overly tighten
Mhm.
and then quickly release it. So when you're overly tightening a muscle group and then quickly releasing it, it's relieving the tension. It's helping to elongate the muscles. So when you do this progressively through the body before bed or in a high stress situation, squinting the eyes, the Home Alone phase,
Yeah.
and you work through the whole body, it's a whole exercise. There are free apps for that. But what happens is you literally are relieving tension. All of a sudden, you see your brain is constantly scanning. It's checking and saying, okay, how tight are his muscles? How fast is he breathing? How quickly is his heart beating? When those increase, it says, oh, there must be a threat. I need to get ready to protect myself. It could also be that you had caffeine or you just ran up a flight of stairs, but it doesn't always check to discern what the cause was. So when you're holding all that tension and your body is perceiving it, now what's happening is it's saying, well, I can't let him sleep. I can't let him fully rest because when we sleep, it can be considered a vulnerable state. We're not awake and alert to protect ourselves. So
Wow.
when we have all that tension and all of that stress, which could be another reason why you're waking up and you're feeling more tired because you're not fully able to get the full restorative, restful sleep because your body is a little more hypervigilant. We see this with new parents. We see this with like my military folks, lots of people, first responders and people on call and healthcare workers that are constantly having to wake up. But there's all these, we could go down all those as
So
well.
doing the what you just had me do with my shoulder, like, I mean, my shoulders feel a little bit more relaxed. I
Yeah.
mean, just as we speak.
Yeah.
So doing the full body exercise in theory will get you better sleep.
So I have a lot of people that before bed, and we can talk about it in a second if you want how to shut the brain off. But part of it is when we're crawling in bed and we're allowing the body to fully relax, then it relieves the tension, it helps increase circulation. I've had a lot of anecdotal stories from patients, for instance, with chronic pain, that when they do that before bed, because if you relieve the tension, you don't feel pain as
Yeah.
much. Individuals, a lot of patients I used to work with movement disorders and tremors and such, again, you relieve the tension in the body, you have less of that jerkiness and movement. And just a lot of my athletes, because a lot of people aren't good about stretching after the gym.
No, I'm awful at it, and I will 100% admit that.
Just typing all day. Or I mean, we're sitting here for however long you're in the same position.
Yeah.
That's why I always make sure that I am slightly shifting and adjusting so that I'm not always sitting. And we saw so much of this during the pandemic where more people were sitting and were less mobile. And so now we're holding more tension. And so how this comes back around. So we talked about how does the stress and the anxiety play the role in sleep? Well, if our brain is thinking that we're showing signs of protecting ourselves from threat, of course, it's not going to let us rest and relax. I talk about stress in general as the demands are exceeding the resources that are available.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So, and this originally, it came from definitions from Hayes and a number of psychologists. I want to make sure I give credit where it's due
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But the idea behind it, so we live here in Charleston, right? Our trees are designed to bend under the heavy hurricane forces.
Mhm.
But no matter how flexible they are, if the gale forces are strong enough, the trees still break. So think of stress fracture. You put enough pressure on something. And so that's where we see this leading to burnout, where the demands are exceeding the resources that we have available in all these domains of our lives. It could be things we care about, caregiving, volunteering, but we just don't seem to have enough hours in the day. So now we're cutting into our sleep to try to make something else. So it's important for people to realize that sometimes from a burnout standpoint, it's not so much what it is, but what it isn't. It's
Mm,
not that you're lazy. It's not that you can't handle things, that you don't want to work hard.
mhm.
It's that the demands are exceeding the resources that you have. And then if you're not getting enough sleep to refill the tank, and I'll just see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, that speaks directly to me because I always joke around like I'm a workaholic, not in the sense like I'm getting a better relationship with it now, but I enjoy work. I love it. Like for some,
Yeah.
this is where I'm also a little like, it's just one thing that I'm good at and I enjoy. So like, for me, I have a very obsessive personality as well. Like I enjoy something, I'll obsess over it. And like, part of that's the ADHD and whatever. But,
Too much sleep helps.
yeah. So like I struggle with burnout. And I noticed it, like, especially in real estate, because like there is no real estate, there's no schedule to it because like people get off work and that's typically when they start calling me.
They need you to be available and you don't have the typical 9 to 5, so you can't always stick to the typical schedule.
Exactly. And like with also like with this podcast, there's a lot of times where I'm editing at night and all that stuff. So I realized the burnout over this holiday season because I rested and I said, I'm turning everything off. I'm not going to focus on the podcast. I'm not going to focus on real estate. Like I've closed all my deals. I'm going to have a couple here and there that I'll just
Yeah.
touch with, but genuinely just disconnect. Because then in the new year, I'm going to hit it full speed. So with what you're saying is I'm going to hit that same burnout again because I don't have the amount of resources or the bandwidth capacity.
Well, some of it is, I mean, everybody has a different level,
Hmm.
right? A bandwidth and such. But some of it is the fact that we have to actually give our bodies the opportunity to rest.
Hmm.
So if you think about your computer, you run it and run it and run it. Sometimes you have to do a forced shutdown so that it can shut down and reboot. And I know I'm using a lot of these computer analogies,
No, I love it.
but if you think about it, it's the same thing for us. So research actually shows that the individuals that took an average of at least 11 vacation days a year had higher performance and productivity, more likely to be promoted, to earn the bonuses, and all of that. The
Mm.
justification to help them to realize that productivity. When we're not getting enough quality sleep, we tend to be more prone towards multitasking. And while it may feel like, great, we can multitask and get a lot done,
Yeah.
that process of constantly having to shift tasks can actually make us up to 40% less productive in terms of our productive time that's being
Wow.
spent. So it doesn't mean that we should never multitask, but we want to be cautious of how one thing is leading to something else. Even as small as turning off some of the pop up notifications or being able to set specific times to be able to get things done.
Hmm.
Because then what happens is then we're going throughout the day, we go, go, go. We haven't given our brain the chance to process and decompress. Now we climb in bed. It's the first time we're alone with our thoughts all day. We want to go to sleep and our brain isn't ready to shut down.
Mm.
I always say, would you take the casserole out of the oven and put it directly in the fridge, or would you sit it on the counter and let it cool down first?
Let it cool down.
But we don't do that with our brain. We run it hot and then we want it to turn off because we want to use every minute that we're awake.
Interesting.
So what we have to do, two things. If you want to be better at falling asleep and being able to shut your brain off and actually de-stress,
Yeah.
one, you need to start creating sleep triggers and a sleep routine. Think about for kids. There's the whole process. It's time for bedtime. We're going to go and do our bath and we're going to brush our teeth and wash our face, read the book. Some families say their prayers, whatever their family does. There's all the steps that tell the kid, prepare for bed, it's time to sleep. As adults, we don't have that. Most of us, we go, go, go. We climb in bed and now we doom scroll. That's literally the thing
Yeah.
that is our trigger for sleep. And then we wonder why we can't fall asleep. So we need to have a routine that helps us to know when it's time to sleep. That's also one of the reasons why and especially because we use our devices. And I know we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's why we see so many people having melatonin deficiencies.
That's interesting. I knew we were going to save it for like kind of the end. That was going to be my grand finale, but I kind of want to talk about it now. Because I noticed, so like I love trying different things out and noticing things like with my routine. When am I more productive? When do I wake up? Like when I wake up on my alarm the first time, like I try to think back, okay, what did I do the night before so I can replicate that? Because I like that. Felt good.
Probably less stress,
Yeah.
probably ready to do that. And
So I
yeah,
was like, what was that? And like one thing I started doing is like when me and my wife, we'd get in bed at a late And then I would, hop on TikTok or, check emails. And I was like, I'll just do it for 15 minutes. Do it for 15 minutes, go there. And then getting up was the hardest freaking thing. I skipped more gym days doing that because I did it. I was like, all right, I'm going to do this for a week. And I did it. And I was like, why am I not getting up? And then I was like, I'm going to just not do it. I'm going to go straight to bed.
I'm trying to not have the judgy face when you're
No,
talking.
no, because I,
This makes me
no, yeah, no, and I want the judgments because I
We'll
noticed
talk about it. We'll
I
talk
noticed
about
the
it.
huge difference because the moment I said no, I literally take my watch off, I put it on the
Mhm.
docking station, I take my phone, and I said I'm done.
Yeah.
And I turned my phone and I did the little on Apple.
Do
If
not
you have an
disturb.
Apple, yeah, on Apple you can set your bedtime. I set it at 9:30, so I don't get any notifications because I would always my clients would be texting me 10, 12 o'clock, and I'd hear the ding and I'd wake up.
Uh-huh.
But like I noticed that, and it's a lot easier to get up.
Okay, so since we're going to talk about
Yeah.
technology, I'm going to give you a few things with that. So everything you've hit on, spot on, and these are part of the problems. Since we've seen the introduction of the smartphones and the tablets, we've seen a significant exponential growth and increase in insomnia and sleep problems. What's really intriguing, so I'll have you take a guess. By the time a child hits the age of 18, across the 18 years, how much time do you think they have on average spent on a screen or on a
Oh
device?
God, almost 12 hours, 20 hours a day.
By the time an 18-year-old hits the age of 18, they've spent an average of 5.6 years on a screen.
Holy crap!
Almost a third of their life.
That is insane.
Yeah. And some of it is a necessity.
Yeah.
That's with the learning mechanisms and other pieces. But the reason that I'm sharing that is we are seeing such significant increases in sleep problems. And a lot of it is because of the light. And so what happens is our eye perceives light,
Mhm.
our optic nerve, and it sends messages to, speaking of the brain, a part of the brain. He told me he wanted us to talk about the brain a lot.
Yes.
So I'm allowed to bring those
I'm
pieces up.
obsessed with it.
So there's a little part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. We'll call it the sleep switch.
Oh God, I'm not gonna remember that sleep switch. I'll remember.
Yes. You can call it the SCN or the sleep switch. And so what it basically says is it's light out, be awake. It's dark out, be asleep. Survival, right? It's light out.
Yeah.
I'm going to come out. I'm going to hunt. I'm going to gather. It's dark. It's time to go to bed. So what traditionally would happen is as the sun started to set, as it started to get darker, those cues would trigger the brain to start changing the chemicals that were being produced. And so when it was starting to get darker, we would start to see, for instance, more melatonin being produced. So for the typical individual, melatonin would spike 4 to 6 hours before bedtime. That's why most people are, and again, I always have to give the caveat, I'm not a prescribing provider, do what your doctor is telling you.
Yeah.
But the typical person using melatonin is doing it incorrectly, and that's why they're not having the advantageous results that they want. You're not supposed to take melatonin 20 to 30 minutes before bedtime. It's not a sedative or a hypnotic. It's not designed to knock you out. The typical prescribing provider will tell their patients to take it 2 to 4 hours before bed, or at the latest 1 to 2 hours before bed, because what it does is it shifts our circadian rhythm of when we should feel tired and when we feel awake. That's why people that wake up at 3 in the morning say, oh, I have to go back to bed. And now they're having all this anxiety about
Yeah.
sleeping. And they pop a melatonin and they wake up 3 hours later. They feel tired and groggy and have the sleep hangover, is because they took something 3 hours before waking up. They were supposed that their body technically was spiking in 4 to 6 hours before going to bed. And so they're shifting their circadian rhythm. So there's all kinds of things about how much to take and when to take it. And we could get into all of that. But the idea is that, so with our devices and our technology, so there's research showing, especially for adolescents and kids, when they're on their devices before bed, it can delay their ability to fully go to sleep in a restful sleep by up to 2 hours. So we
Jeez.
need to be getting off of the devices. If you have to be on it, put it in night mode. A black background with white lettering
Yeah.
instead of white with black lettering, it emits less light. The do not disturb is such an important piece. I will tell people because they're worried, well, what if somebody important needs to reach me? Well, you can add people on your breakthrough call list. And if anybody calls you twice in a row in quick succession, even if it's on do not disturb, it will still ring through.
Yeah.
It's a safety feature. So the key here is that we don't want to have all those alerts because now we know when we're sleeping and our eyes are closed, we can perceive light changes through our eyelids. So all of those that's why when the sun comes up, it wakes us
Hmm.
up in the
Yeah.
morning. So all of those flashes, our brain's trying to perceive what's happening when it's on our arm and that close to our face. That's why I typically recommend wearables that either don't have the screens or where you can put the screen on mute
Yeah.
to track for sleep. So there's all of those light pieces. The other things are, so you crawl in bed. We talked about the brain running and racing. If you're about to go to bed and you're not going to actually respond to your emails, why do you need to check them?
Yeah.
You don't. Your brain's going to start thinking about how to respond. The TV and the podcasts, let's talk about how that disrupts your sleep. Have you ever noticed that the commercials are louder than the regular programming?
It annoys the crap out of me.
But think about it's because it's supposed to get your attention. It
Yeah.
wants you to look, right? But now you're starting to fall asleep and that volume change is going to pull you back up and wake you back up. Or so what's happening, or like the podcasts, while we would love everybody to listen to this, we
Yes.
don't want it to put you to sleep. And so what happens is that as you're falling asleep and there's the voices in the background, your brain again is scanning for threat. So it's hearing these voices and it's checking and saying, okay, is that voice supposed to be in bed with me? Is this safe? Is this a threat? And so we have all these little micro awakenings that are happening, pulling us out of restorative sleep because our brain is trying to check for threats and wanting to protect us. So there's so many things. So that's why I put your phone across the room. So then when the alarm goes off in the morning, you have to get out of bed to turn it off and you can't hit the snooze button.
That is, oh God, that is so interesting. Cause I think, so I noticed that with, like, I'd be on TikTok, Instagram or something, or like, my favorite thing's ChatGPT. I love ChatGPT. Like, so I'd be sitting there brainstorming like new content ideas,
Mhm.
new, business ideas and stuff like that, and be sitting there working. And I was like, I'll just dedicate 15 minutes to it every night. Like, so if I'm at my bedtime's 10:30, I'd start at 9:15, get in bed, and would just sit there.
Just get out of bed.
And that's what, like, so then I was like, okay, well, I'm not getting that sleep. And then it, goes down the rabbit hole. My productivity is just trash. So then I was like, okay, I haven't done that in a while. But then I love just getting in bed and watching like a Netflix series, like one episode and then heading to bed. So now I'm starting to think the reason I can't get up to my alarm is because I switched it.
So the thing is,
That's
do
interesting.
these things before you get into bed because you still have all that light, you have the sound, and your brain is now learning, I need to be awake, brainstorming and getting excited, and I'm amping myself up instead of being in bed. Or I need to be paying attention to the content of what I'm seeing on TV. This is why, and this is one of my favorite tips to give all people. I've literally seen this work, as I said, from working with professional athletes to military, corporate execs, founders, stay at home moms, you name it.
Yeah.
About 15 to 20 minutes before bedtime. And this is part of that. We talked about giving your brain the wind down time. Our brains are designed to process information. They need to be able to do so, but we don't typically give it the chance to do so. So, about 15 to 20 minutes before bed, out of bed, and no technology. Take a notepad and a pen, and on the right hand side, write your to do list for the next day. Because what's going to happen is you're going to climb in bed and you're going to start thinking through everything you have to do. I have to go to the bank. I have to go to the dry cleaners. I need to rewatch that podcast episode,
Yeah.
all the important things. So you write that down. And then on the left hand side, you are going to write and literally dump everything through your brain that's going through your brain on that sheet of paper. But here's the trick, I have people set a timer for 5 minutes to start. And the reason is because most people will write for about a minute and it's
Mm.
high level kids, family, finances, whatever. But when you're forced to write longer for like 3 to 5 minutes, one, it's like those quick writes in college where you felt like it was forever.
Yeah.
But the more you're writing, more and more starts pouring out of your brain. And you will start looking at saying, you're not creating worries. So you don't, what it's doing is it's giving your brain the time to process everything that you hadn't given it the chance to do throughout the day. You're going to start problem solving through. You're going to realize what you were thinking about. We're no longer avoiding. And when you're done, you're going to feel exhausted. So you take it, you put it on your nightstand, and you get in bed. And if your brain is still running and racing, you get out of bed, you write more, you get back in bed. So just like you take that puppy and you put it outside
Yeah.
to potty, you're taking your brain and putting it outside of bed and teaching it that it doesn't get to go in bed anymore. So now it's no longer running and racing. And when you wake up at 3 in the morning and your brain is doing the same thing, you get back out of bed and write. So what you're doing is you're training the body and brain. One, I'm going to give you the time that you need. Don't do it in bed. And two, you're teaching it in general that bed is not the time to do it. So you're no longer taking your troubles to sleep with you, and you're no longer trying to force yourself to fall asleep.
Interesting. That's so interesting because I've noticed one of the things I did in college, and it was kind of by accident when I started working out. And I like working out in the mornings because it's just,
Yeah.
win the morning, win the day is kind of my philosophy. And one of the things I love the mornings because it's about 45 minutes to an hour that I'm in the gym. And that was just me, myself. I'd
Yeah.
put earbuds in and I don't play anything, super like words. It's typically like some soft, lo-fi music or EDM
Just
or
let your
something.
brain do its thing.
And
Be
I
creative.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's my thing. So, like, I think that always helped me go to I fall asleep faster
Yeah.
because I was like, I have my time. So would you recommend, like, okay, if someone's like, well, I work, until 7 and I get home and I have to shower and I have to cook and I have to clean, get set up and then I'm in bed. I don't want to take 5 minutes to sit there and write. Like I'm already exhausted, I'm tired. Would you recommend them at least have one portion of their day of just dedicating of sitting there by themselves in their head to discern everything?
So I will say a yes and.
Okay.
And here's why. So there's a couple things. So one, it's actually really important to take at least 10, 15 minutes a day and just give your brain that chance to process.
Mhm.
It's how it's wired, it's how it's designed, it's what it needs to do. So we want to be doing that. I recommend for a lot of people to do that at the end of the workday to process everything they did that day with work, because then it makes it easier to leave work. And even if you work at home, do that, write it down, put it on the notepad, put it on your desk, and then you can step away. So when you're with your family or doing other things, you're not still thinking about your to-do list. Because when you write things down, you don't have to keep remembering it in your brain and using the brain space for it. So it's really good to do that at the end of the workday. The reason that I tell people to do the writing before bed is that most people will crawl in bed and their mind is running and racing.
Yeah.
If you climb in bed and your brain isn't doing the processing and you just fall right to sleep, then yes, do that writing at a different time of the day. Some people are so exhausted that they fall asleep great, but they wake up in the middle of the night once they have a little energy, or they have all it in the morning. So it is good to do that writing each day, which is why I'm saying the yes, but the and,
Yeah.
in the sense of if you're finding that it's hard to shut your brain off at night, the sleep triggers, the sleep routine, and that writing give your brain that chance to do that unwinding that it didn't have the rest of the day. Some people need to do it after work for work. They need to do it before bed, even if it's 1 or 2 minutes, just to jot down a few things. Because think about it. We crawl in bed. What's the thing with the computer? The hardware's ready to shut down, but such and
Yeah.
such is running in the background.
Yeah.
We're forcing the software to shut down so that we can get that quality sleep.
Interesting. That's so fascinating because I'm all about journaling. I do it every morning. And typically one, it makes me less stressed because
Yeah.
I just put it out there.
Exactly the point.
And that's fascinating because I'm gonna flip it.
Well, here's
I'm
the thing.
trying
If it's, and not to interrupt you, but
No,
if it is working for you, like doing your stuff in the morning, if something isn't broken, don't fix it.
it's true.
But so if that's your quiet time and that's what your brain is used to, but it doesn't mean that you can't add a few minutes at night.
That's what I was thinking.
So
Like,
keep the morning with what's working well for you, but add into your bedtime routine, give yourself even a quick 3, 5 minutes and just say, you know what? If you're going to crawl in bed and you're going to be thinking about something, write it down. Because when you write it and put it on the nightstand, it gives your brain permission to no longer have to be holding on to it and thinking about it. And that's why it's so good to put it on the nightstand because you know it's right there. You know exactly where it is. And when you wake up, you can pick it up again. You don't have to hold on to it while you're in bed.
mm, that's interesting because I mean, I've been an advocate of like mental wellness in the sense of like not to the extreme of some, but like I think it's always good one to be in a room by yourself in complete silence, which is I hate it, but I force myself to do it because it's helped me so much. Like I hear it's not a ringing in the sense of like the the
Tinnitus or tinnitus or
yeah,
something.
it's
Yeah.
not that, but it's just like in a ringing of just constant things where my head's going. Like, and with my ADHD, I say ADD, literally, it's like Nella and Jello to a wall. It's like, oh, squirrel, oh, another squirrel, oh, two squirrels. And it's like, so for me, so I ran 2 half marathons and I hate running. But yeah, my mom called me and said, hey, I signed this up. I was like, when is it? 2 months from now. I'm like, oh, okay.
We're training now.
I was like, all right, well, we should have been training like 6 months ago, but it was the greatest thing because for 2.5 hours. I had my earbuds in. I think it was something like that. 2.5 hours, ran a half marathon, completely just me, myself, and the road
Yeah.
and music. And I've never been more creative in that moment. That's where I got the idea to go into real estate, then and the confidence to do it
Yeah.
as well. So I think that's really fascinating because I used to always think, oh, the thoughts running in my head before bed are good because I'm brainstorming and all that stuff. But in reality, like I'm not recovering a full 100%.
Well, the thing too, though, is that you're not, it's not that the creativity isn't helpful, but are you even remembering some of that stuff? Because if you're laying in bed and you're thinking these things, but you're not writing it down, you may not remember all of it as well.
Yeah.
And so that's where, if you're doing some of that writing, when you have those creative moments, if you get out of bed and you write it all down, then, and like I said, that's where we've seen, I mean, I can tell you so many musicians and scientists and all of these people where, yes, sleep is used for that creativity. And that's
Mm.
where they use the naps and the other things in there as well. But it's how are you using it more deliberately and strategically? So if you write before bed, instead of laying in bed and thinking about it, you're actually writing it down so you can build on it later. And if you're waking up in the middle of the night, I want you to write it on the paper instead of picking up your phone. Because when you pick up your phone, now you have the light that's coming off the screen that's also waking up your brain.
Mm.
And now you're being distracted and you see this tweet and this message and this thing and everything else that's going on instead of just being focused on whatever the creative thing was. So we're not trying to squelch the creativity. We're trying to actually direct it and help you be more deliberate and strategic with it. And that's where, for a lot of the founders and entrepreneurs, where it is that point of, okay, well, it is only just me and I have to put all this extra hours in. I'm not saying that there will never be a time where you get the perfect that you want. My CPAs, we're getting ready, for what's happening,
God
for
help
peak
them all.
season, right?
Yeah.
In busy seasons, right? With real estate, now you're getting into the spring, right?
Yeah.
So different work, and depending on what industry you're in, you have different busy seasons. But if we understand how sleep works, we understand what we optimally need, then we're able to make those modifications. Then we're able to be more strategic about it. So we can use sleep as that superpower that we want to harness
Yeah.
instead of that thing that we deprioritize. And now we try to cram everything else in. There's a concept that when I talk about stress and such called planned neglect
Mm.
that I love to talk about. And it's that idea where when there are so many things going on and you just truly can't fit everything in, if you figure out what are the things that you're going to plan to neglect, then you feel like you can take control back and it makes you feel less stressed.
Mhm.
So maybe it's, you know what, I'm not going to cook the healthy dinner every single night, but I'm going to order a healthy takeout. So those 30 minutes I can put back towards my sleep or I can spend with my kids or whatever else that it is, but you feel like you're taking back control.
Yeah. I love that because I don't know if you know Dan Martell. He wrote Buy Back Your Time, and it's kind of that concept. And that's one thing that I did when I got into real estate. My wife is starting her business and everything. So her bandwidth was stretched and mine was stretched. So like cleaning the house, it was exhausting.
What is your time worth?
Exactly. And so I was like, I'm going to hire a cleaner. That was the best money I've ever spent my entire life. Now I'm just looking for a cook. Stuff your cook, no. But, that was the best thing.
Yeah.
And, the other thing I want to hit on, because I think it's so important, I've done it in my morning routine, and I think everybody listening should do it as well, is one of the things is the one thing that I do, and you mentioned it, is when I wake up, my alarm goes off, and Spotify typically, I already know where it is. I can hit play and just play. I don't look at my phone until roughly around 8.
That's good.
And it is I don't know why I started that randomly. Probably heard it on TikTok somewhere. I don't know. But I've been doing that for years. And it's been the greatest thing because I'm like, no, if it can't wait till 8, then if it's my wife, is whoever it is, they'll let me know. Like it's something important. But like I won't look at my phone. Like who's
The
gonna
important people know how to reach you.
Exactly.
But then your phone takes control or you're down the rabbit hole and you've lost 20 minutes here, or now something else has pulled you in. And that's also where we not only cutting into your sleep, but just adding to your stress because then now the day is spun out of control and you're not able to do all the things that you actually are wanting to do.
Yeah. And then I think like I love TikTok in the sense of, it's entertaining, but also I hate it because when TikTok
Pulls
came
you
out,
in.
it pulls me in and like it requires so much discipline to really set like, all right, this is my time. This is, and I've had to train myself to do that, which is not easy because
You can set your Wi-Fi router to shut off at a certain point so that
Really?
it's, yeah.
Oh,
There are parental settings and things that you can do where I've actually had to work with some people, like literally some of my business owners, to literally stop themselves from working and everything else where they set it and it at least shuts off and they know how to go and turn it back on, but it's that little check
hopefully
to
my wife
them.
doesn't hear this because she'll figure it out. Be like, why is the router not working? No, that's interesting. But I think that's, I mean, where we're taking this and where we've taken this, I mean, I love your approach to sleep because a lot of people think, sleep, oh, you need sleep. Okay, why? You're taking sleep as like this is a skill to better your productivity. This is a skill that you should learn, leverage, and use rather than just, oh, you're just supposed to sleep.
Well, and that's it. It's a fundamental piece. If you think about it, people talk about sleep, nutrition, exercise.
Hmm.
Well, you need to get the quality sleep so that your exercise works for you the right way. Same thing with food and how our body processes calories and food and produces the hormones. And we could get into all these pieces.
Hmm.
And so I am trying to help people and there's been many celebrities that have come out and books that have been written and talking about that hustle culture that for a lot of people, then it burns them out. And this thing that they used to love, they don't love anymore.
Mm.
And so, what I think from a sleep standpoint is one, you have to look at the practicality. So, I can talk about to people, and we've been sharing about typical sleep strategies. And yes, you want to have a consistent bedtime and a consistent wake time. Well, if you have a 2-year-old, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night, right? And if you're in your busy season, these things are going to happen. And so, the way that I like to approach it is let's be more informed. Let's have enough information to be dangerous that we understand how sleep works. We start shifting our thinking that sleep is something we want to prioritize instead of something that we want to cut into. I mean, even the sleep window that we talked about, for those folks that were spending 10 hours in bed to get 6 hours of sleep, we just taught them how to create 4 more hours in their day.
Hmm.
Because if you're spending 6 hours in bed to get 6 hours of sleep instead of 10 hours, there's 4 more hours that you can use to do all the other things that you've wanted to do. And you have time for your meal prep or your exercise or whatever. So it's how can we look at sleep instead of this thing that we have to do,
Hmm.
but this thing that truly is something that we get to do and that helps to set us up for success for everything else. But how do we do it in a practical way
Yeah.
instead of feeling hopeless? Okay, well, if I don't sleep well this night, it's all lost. Or if I can't do everything she said, that's why I like to give all of these different strategies. And when I'm working with individuals, it's okay, let's look at your circumstances.
Hmm.
Are you traveling? Do we need to deal with jet lag and time zone changes? How can we optimize our sleep there? If we do have a job where we're, having to get bimodal sleep or we're awake because we're in the middle of the night or we're on a call, how do we optimize so we can fall back to sleep and get more efficient sleep if we don't have the full amount that we want? So, yes, there are ideals, and it's my job to teach people the ideals, but it's also how can you practically apply these strategies to take back control over something that your body has been designed to naturally do to set you up for success?
I think this is so cool because I've always saw a sleep as like a liability. Ah, it's a requirement that my body needs. I got to do it, whatever. You're,
It does need it.
it does need it, but it's more of like a nuisance because to me, it adds no value in my head
Hopefully, you don't
before.
feel that way after
No,
today.
because after today, I'm like, no, that's an asset. Like if I can
Yes.
leverage that, then it ultimately I'm going to outperform my competition
Yeah.
because the competition is like, oh, time is money, can't sleep. And so I think that's really a really, really cool spin that you've put on sleep. And I still didn't, I wanted to talk about
I was gonna say, and it'll
caffeine and
reduce your
everything.
stress because when we're
Yeah.
sleeping, it helps to refill that tank. I mean, so that's where there's that reciprocal relationship. There's so much there from our memory, attention, focus, concentration, health, healing. And we haven't gotten into heart health. There is such a thing. I mean, beauty rest truly is. It's a sleep for our skin, for every
Yeah.
aspect of our life.
God.
So
We're gonna have to do a part 2 because I mean, I haven't even got to caffeine yet, and like we're hitting the max right now, and I freaking love it.
So, all right, I will ask you this question then.
Okay.
So, since we can touch more on the caffeine and things then, but do you know, on average, how long it takes? So, if you have 1 cup of coffee, how many hours is that in your body before your body really metabolizes out the caffeine? Like, how long does the caffeine stick with you? Take a guess. 2 hours, 4 hours? What do you think?
4 to 5.
So, on average, it's closer to 8.
Oh dear God.
So the half-life of caffeine is on average about 5 hours. For the typical person, it takes about 7 to 8 as high 8 hours to get it out of the system. So if you can have 2 espressos and fall right to sleep, yes, we need to talk about your tolerance. But it's also important to note how caffeine works. See, there's a chemical from the time we wake up, our body starts to produce a chemical called adenosine.
Okay. Yes.
Adenosine, think of it as like that heaviness, the sleepiness. Like the
Yeah.
more adenosine in the body, the more sleepy we are.
Mhm.
Caffeine mimics it. The chemical structure is very similar. And so when we have caffeine in our system and our body's perceiving the caffeine, it doesn't realize how much adenosine is there. So let me put that in practical terms. It's not that caffeine technically makes us less tired. It's blocking our ability to perceive that we're tired. So that's why you can have the coffee and still fall asleep. That's why people fall asleep behind the wheel. Now, caffeine acts differently depending on certain circumstances. So, like people with ADD and ADHD find that caffeine can help them to focus and concentrate
Mhm.
better. And there's a lot more we could get into the brain and neuroscience. But the key to note is that so if you're constantly having caffeine, your body is no longer registering when it's tired. So you could see how that could be a detriment to you
That makes
because
so much sense now for me.
we're supposed to feel tired so that our body knows when to rest and rejuvenate itself. And we're not even going to get into the alcohol conversation right now, but I will leave you with
Oh,
the fact that sedation is not sleep. So just because you're unconscious does not mean that you're getting restful sleep. Because alcohol actually is a REM suppressant. It reduces the amount of REM sleep you're getting. So from the cognitive performance, the emotion regulation, and it fragments your sleep. It makes you wake up more frequently.
so a
So
glass of bourbon before bed is probably not the best thing to do.
I'm not saying that you will never have your nightcap or you'll have, your drink with dinner or whatever else. But what I am saying is that we need to pay attention for those that are using alcohol as the self medication to sleep. Oh, I'm stressed. I'm going to have a couple drinks. Now
Yeah.
I fall asleep. Great, you fall asleep. But that does not mean that you're getting restful sleep. That's that whole point of sedation is not sleep.
Interesting.
So much more that we
Oh
could talk about. I
God.
know. I know we're running out of time
I
today.
know we are, but gosh, it's been so good, and I'm really glad that you brought this insight, especially to entrepreneurs, like passion seekers, the people that are tuning in. I think it's a skill that needs to be learned. After this, like before, I was like, oh, sleep, cool, but after this, it's like no, it's an asset to help you be a better business owner, be a better leader, be a better entrepreneur, whatever you
Just enjoy
are.
life.
Yeah, and yeah, wow, yeah, this is gonna stay in my mind for quite a while.
So I will leave you for your viewers
Yeah,
my sleep well guide, which
yes,
has
please.
16 different tips and strategies, a lot of what we talked about today to summarize it, as well as access to my website. I have my Wellbeing Wednesday video library,
Yes.
close to 200 videos. They're about 3 minutes or less for short attentions.
Yeah.
But it goes through all these different tips and strategies for stress, for sleep, about why is it important and what's a practical tip or something that you can do. So I'll make
Love it.
sure that you have all of those
Yeah,
resources that your viewers and listeners can
absolutely.
get access to.
Yeah, I'll put that down into the comments or into the description of the video. Please check that out because I mean, yeah, I'm blown away. Speechless, seriously. But yeah, no, thank you for letting us know that. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm excited. This was a lot of fun. And listen, part two. Put your questions in the comment now because I have 1,000 and I know y'all do. But thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Sweet dreams.
1 hour and 20.
Oh my goodness.
I could have gone for another hour.
Right?